No character in action represents the idea of childhood and innocence better than SpongeBob. As we all know, he is absorbent and porous and literally lives in a pineapple under the sea. Surely nothing could be more dark or ominous in a universe with fruit-themed houses, right? Wrong. Well, as it turns out, given enough time, the internet can find something evil even in the most childish of tales. Today's list is going to be clear evidence of this fact, as we will dive deep into the 10 darkest theories that fans have created about the iconic kids show and how true they are. But before we move on, please like our video and subscribe to our channel. It might be a small click for you, but to us, it means an awful lot.
Remember what happened last time you left me here alone?
Bikini Bottom is the result of nuclear testing. In the world of SpongeBob, Bikini Bottom is the center of the universe. Most of the significant landmarks that audiences recognize from the series finds their roots here, including Krusty Krab, Rock Bottom, and Seashell Park. So far, we've only known the quirky underwater to be a perfect haven for our characters, with rarely any crime or conflict. Throughout the show, we have had glimpses of the city in vastly different time periods, ranging from the prehistoric era all the way to the 41st century. However, according to many fans, the quaint underwater paradise is home to a particularly dark secret. It all starts with a name. SpongeBob's town happens to find a strange namesake in Bikini Atoll, the US's top secret nuclear site, where they tested around 23 bombs during the World War era. Uncanny, right? Things are made even more intriguing by Reddit user Antinestio's observation that in Season 2, when a pie bomb goes off, the footage showing the explosion is from an actual nuclear test that took place on Bikini Atoll. If this theory is true, then it also raises the questions on the origins of sentient creatures like SpongeBob that inhabit Bikini Bottom. Is it possible that all these cute characters are actually the victims of lingering radiation that mutated the organisms living at the bottom of the sea? Krabby Patties are actually crab meat. We'd be lying if we told you that we've never craved Krusty Krab's famed delicacies, the Krabby Patties. It's perfectly normal to feel like gulping down a couple of vegetarian burgers from an underwater joint. That's right, the Krabby Patties are vegetarian according to both the creators and Mr. Krab himself. The burger is essentially a frozen patty with lettuce, onions, cheese, pickles, and a bunch of common condiments. But then, what is it that makes the patty so uniquely delicious? According to Mr. Krabs, the flavor comes from a secret ingredient that only he knows. Well, the whole reason Krabs' ingredient is so secret might actually be too dark to both the audience and the restaurant's patrons. Many Redditors have raised a disturbing question. What if Krabby Patties are actually made out of crabs? The closest we've come to discovering the secret ingredient was during the Season 6 episode, Krabby Road, where we see Plankton and Mr. Krabs fighting over a sheet of paper with the ingredients scribbled on it in gibberish. Though it's unlikely that we will ever know the secret ingredient, it does make us wonder why we've never seen another crab throughout the show. Maybe Mr. Krabs just grinded all his friends into patties, including his wife, the long-absent Mrs. Krabs. Though that doesn't make the patties thoroughly unappetizing for the average human, crab meat isn't really the worst thing that one can put in a burger, as we will soon see.
Is this the part where we start kicking?
No, SpongeBob, that's a chorus line.
Kicking? Oh, I want to do some kicking!
Every character has a mental illness. SpongeBob probably has one of the most iconic ensembles of characters in its roster, each beloved in its own unique way. Whether it's Squidward's cranky old man demeanor or Patrick's dumb goof-ups, each of SpongeBob's friends have been a companion for entire generations. However, many longtime fans who grew up with the show have observed that if each character's mannerisms, patterns, were treated like a real person's instead of a cartoon, an unsettling pattern begins to emerge. Let's take SpongeBob's jittery, wacky antiques for example. Are these just for comedic effect, or does something darker lie beneath his smiling facade? Well, many internet users claim that SpongeBob's personality traits are perfectly aligned to those of ADHD patients. Still not convinced? Let's consider our protagonist's close friend Patrick Star. It turns out that the starfish's goofy personality might also be a representation of Down syndrome. A Reddit user claims that Squidward's total lack of joy in even the most hilarious of pursuits throughout the show might actually be evidence of his underlying depression. This theory has grown extremely popular in recent times on apps like TikTok, with comments like, "I'd never be able to watch SpongeBob the same way again. We hear you, random stranger. We hear you." Mr. Krabs is raising Pearl for slaughter. One of the most confusing characters for most viewers of the show is Pearl, Mr. Krabs' daughter. The reason for this is confusing is because Mr. Krabs, as the name states, is a crab, while Pearl is a whale with blonde hair. Since Mr. Krabs is neither blonde nor a whale, it does lead to questions regarding Pearl's real parents. At one point in time, Mr. Krabs mentions that the young whale takes after her mother, which just leads to even more questions. All throughout the show, we have known Mr. Krabs to be a greedy, scheming businessman with only limited patience for displays of emotion. Thus, it is unlikely that Krabs just adopted Pearl out of the kindness of his heart. Raising a kid requires a lot of money, something that Krabs actually holds extremely dear. Thus, many viewers have come up with a theory that there has to be an ulterior motive behind Krabs' kindness. Out here on the surface, whales are good business. They have a bunch of stuff in their body like whale oil and blubber, which is pretty expensive in the real world. If we extend the same logic to our underwater universe, it does mean that Pearl is worth quite a lot. Maybe that's why Krabs is so fond of her, because once Pearl is all grown up, Krabs can slaughter her down to the bone and sell off all those precious whale goodies. Maybe even save some meat for the Krabby Patties. Squidward is suffering from psychosis. Most of us know Squidward as the angry, disillusioned adult figure who literally can't stand SpongeBob and Patrick's antiques and pranks. But what if there was a darker root cause behind his isolation and irrational anger at the world? What if the angry squid was just plain psychotic? Almost all the evidence in support of his entry is concentrated in the Season 3 episode Idiot Box, where SpongeBob and Patrick uses their imagination to play with a box. Throughout the episode, Squidward goes through some pretty mind-bending hallucinations. For example, while watching boxing, he starts having visions of card boxes fighting. When he tries to get his own idiot box, he becomes so frustrated that he has a total breakdown and shows an almost fanatical obsession over it. If you're still unconvinced, there's also that episode where he literally had visions of his marriage to a Krabby Patty. Squidward is SpongeBob's guardian. Squidward and SpongeBob definitely have one of the most tumultuous and hilarious relationships ever documented in a kid's show. Squidward's almost emotionless outlook toward life is the perfect foil for SpongeBob's optimism. The tense relationship between our protagonist and his neighbor has been explored in numerous episodes, but Redditor DirtsPP has come up with a theory that entirely changes how we perceive the duo. The theory claims that Squidward is actually SpongeBob's guardian and has lived alongside him at the behest of his parents. This adds a layer to why Squidward doesn't leave despite SpongeBob's antiques making his life unbearable. This means that Squidward, despite his rough exterior, was a dear friend of SpongeBob's parents and he committed to the taxing job of raising a child on their behalf. If this theory is true, then we have to commend Squidward for keeping up his end of the bargain, as most of us would have left the neighborhood after one full day of SpongeBob's shenanigans.
Gary?
The main characters are the 7 deadly sins. With a show as iconic as SpongeBob, it was only a matter of time before fans started analyzing it throughout different lenses such as art, theory, psychology, and religion. For this entry in the list, we will draw inspiration from the Christian concept of the 7 deadly sins: sloth, gluttony, pride, envy, wrath, and lust. Recently, a new theory regarding the characters came to light when a Reddit user linked the main characters of the kids' show to each of the deadly sins. Though this might sound like a long stretch, it does seem to arouse suspicion on a closer inspection. I mean, who could be a better representation of sloth than Patrick, the lazy starfish who literally got an award for doing absolutely nothing? And there's Mr. Krabs with his excessive fondness for material wealth, and to call him greedy is quite an understatement. Then there's Krabs' arch-rival Plankton, whose entire life revolves around stealing Krusty Krab's secret patty formula. Obvious to say the least, but what about SpongeBob, you ask? Surely our smiling sponge has committed no sin, right? Though not as blatantly sinful as the others, SpongeBob does exhibit great lust for life. Though the word is usually used to refer to sexual desire, in SpongeBob's case, it refers to his genuine fondness and love for all the people in his life. This ceaseless love for his friends can actually get a bit annoying for some, like Squidward, as SpongeBob clearly can't stop himself. Next, let's take Sandy, whose pride is exhibited through her boasts about Texas and her extremely competitive spirit. Last but not least, we have Gary, SpongeBob's pet snail, who doesn't really do anything apart from chowing down. Maybe linking a religious myth to a kids show isn't as outlandish as you thought.
You are the first to taste a Krabby Patty.
Mr. Krabs' secret ingredient is whale vomit. Remember when we told you that crab meat isn't the worst thing that you could put in a burger? Well, this entry here is the reason. We have already seen why the famous Krabby Patties are such an elusive mystery, but a recent theory makes the famous burgers seem gross. We apologize in advance if you're watching this video while having a meal, but there's a popular theory that suggests that the secret ingredient is Pearl's vomit. Knowing Mr. Krabs, it's certain that the only reason he would raise a whale would have to be money, especially something that makes him money, like a lot of money. Since whale vomit is one of the most prized raw ingredients in the perfume industry, it would be reasonable to assume that Krabs knows about it. Thus, he utilizes this perfumed liquid as the base for his burgers, which keeps the patrons coming back for more. Don't know why, but we'd be better off if Mr. Krabs were just a typical cannibal, killing his own kind to make crab meat burgers. It's an incredibly sophisticated representation of global warming. All throughout this list, we've gone through theories that are outrageous, unsettling, and shocking, but for this entry, let's take a turn towards something much more urgent and real: global warming. Ever since he first appeared in 1999, viewers have assumed that their beloved absorbent protagonist is a sea sponge. Sea sponges are multicellular organisms that have pores and channels all through their bodies. This would be pretty likely, considering that most of SpongeBob's friends are clearly inspired by sea organisms too. However, some astute fans have observed that SpongeBob's design is closer to that of a kitchen sponge than of an organism. This would mean that SpongeBob takes place in an era where the trash from our kitchens has reached the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, making global warming a pretty natural threat. Moreover, since SpongeBob, the pollutant, works for a large corporation, Krusty Krab, there might be a deeper allegory here regarding the capitalism's hand in the corruption of our environment. A post on the subreddit r/fan theories also states that SpongeBob's friend Patrick is a symbol of all of Western civilization: unmotivated, overweight, and misinformed. He is propagating pollution due to sheer ignorance. Maybe it's time for you to revisit the older episodes of the show and check this theory out for yourself. SpongeBob is a veteran suffering from PTSD. Another popular theory regarding SpongeBob suggests that our quirky, upbeat protagonist is not as happy as we thought he was. There's been a common complaint in the SpongeBob community that both SpongeBob and Patrick became dumber as time went on. A longtime fan of the show observed that this change might actually be due to permanent cause of SpongeBob's psyche during his time as a war veteran. A gradual decline of mental faculties is common in war veterans suffering from PTSD. Another major piece of evidence is the fact that SpongeBob works for Mr. Krabs, who himself is a well-known veteran. It is likely that the two met in the army and continued to work together after being discharged. Even in the very first episode of the series, when SpongeBob visits Krusty Krab to apply as a fry cook, he addresses Mr. Krabs as captain. Since the show primarily targeted kids, it's unlikely that this theory will ever be confirmed, but it does add another layer to the already iconic show. Marvelous verdict. SpongeBob SquarePants is undoubtedly one of the most beloved figures in kids' entertainment, whose legacy is both long-lived and beloved. Despite being targeted at kids, the show still enjoys a following from all age groups due to its creativity and humor. This list is just another testament to the appeal of the show and is actually an attempt by the people who grew up with the show to perceive it as more than kids' entertainment. As the 90s kids who grew up with cartoons matured into adults, it was only natural that they would find more mature themes and motives in their favorite stories. However, that's it to us, and we leave it up to you viewers to decide which of the theories is true. Do let us know if we missed out on a theory in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more marvelous content, and we'll see you on the next video.